Hi, everybody. Good evening. Welcome to another edition of Captain Lou's Championship Years in Sports History. As we wrap up our look at the championship years or the champions of the year 1997. Good evening, everybody. Hope your summer's going good. I know mine is on this June the 25th, 2024, as we mentioned. Wrapping up the year 1997, our look back at the year 1997, and we thought tonight we would have maybe kind of a potpourri. Is what we'll do is we'll kind of touch on the champions of the 1997 year. We'll take a look back at the NFL Super Bowl champion of the year 1997, the Denver Broncos, getting their first national or their first Super Bowl victory. They were there a few times in the 70s, of course, and also in the 80s, but could never get over the hump. This time they took on the Green Bay Packers. We'll talk about that as well. The NCAA football champions, a split championship, something that kind of still sits in the craw of a lot of us Michigan fans. We'll talk about that. The NCAA basketball champions, MLB, NHL, and we'll even touch on the Masters champion from 1997. I think you know who that is. He's had quite a few majors since then, and he burst on the scene in that 1997 year and winning his first major. Yes, he gave a tiger-like performance, to say the least. Our show tonight brought to you, as always, by tickets.12ouncesports.com. If there's a game that you want to go to this summer, make sure you make it a point to go to tickets.12ouncesports.com, as we are indeed your ticket broker. And we can give you prices that you don't see on some of those secondary markets. That's tickets.12ouncesports.com. And we're also brought to you, as always, here on the show by javicoffee.com. Go to Javi Coffee. Instant coffee is your favorite. Or if you want to try something, if you're a regular coffee drinker, hot or cold, got all kinds of great flavors. And make sure when you go there at checkout, use the promo code Captain Lou for 15% off of your purchase. That is javicoffee.com. All right, again, we are live here on the Captain Lou's Championship Years in Sports History, taking a look back at the year 1997. We'll go through some of the championship teams from that year. It was a great year. Also, we'll talk about the NBA champions, as a team from Chicago was in the midst of their second run of three straight titles. So a lot to talk about here tonight on the show. Glad you could join us. And again, we will bring you all of the champions of 1997. Take a quick look at those seasons as well. Maybe some tidbits of some of the years that you might have missed. So we'll do that and more here in a moment. You're watching Captain Lou's Championship Years in Sports History, and it's live right here on the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube. And of course, as always, on 12 Ounce Sports. Hi, everybody. Captain Lou here from 12 Ounce Sports and, of course, the Captain Lou Extravaganza and Captain Lou's Championship Years in Sports History. Hey, if you're like me, you love to go to ball games, baseball, football, basketball, whatever, minor league baseball, especially this summer. There's nothing better than a Saturday night game, major league or minor league baseball, Sunday afternoon. I've got the place for you to go to get those tickets for those games. Tickets.12ouncesports.com. We are a ticket broker, which means we don't charge you the exorbitant fees that you might see on some of those other secondary markets. Hey, if there's a concert you want to go to this summer, tickets.12ouncesports.com. Use the promo code 12ounce as well, and you'll get a better discount. Tickets.12ouncesports.com. It's that simple. Can't say it enough. For the best prices on tickets this summer, make sure you go to tickets.12ouncesports.com. I mentioned you go to tickets.12ouncesports.com. Again, if you're like me, like I said, thinking about going to a couple of games this summer down in Detroit. Love to watch Shohei Ohtani when the Dodgers come to town in the middle of July, maybe the end of the year when they look back at the 1984 Detroit Tigers. 40 years since they won the World Series championship. They're going to have a reunion. I know where I'm going to get my tickets. That's tickets.12ouncesports.com. All right, again, welcome to the Captain Lou Championship Years in Sports History episode as we take our final look at the year 1997. Some of the champions from that year. Of course, we had Keith Gave on earlier in the month looking at the Detroit Red Wings. They won their first NHL championships or Stanley Cup championship since 1955 that year. And they exacted some revenge on the Colorado Avalanche, winning that best of 7 conference final to get through to the championship, to the Stanley Cup final again. They were there in 1995 and got swept unceremoniously by the New Jersey Devils. But in 1997, they made no mistake about it. They beat the Philadelphia Flyers, who were looking to get back to the top of the heap again, back from their days with the Broad Street Bullies back in the 70s. But they ran into a buzzsaw that was the Detroit Red Wings, and they swept the Philadelphia Flyers in 4 straight. So Steve Yzerman got the first of his Stanley Cups. Detroit, the first of 4 Stanley Cup championships in 12 years, 6 trips to the Stanley Cup finals in 13 years for the Red Wings, and definitely a dominant team right in the middle of that 25 straight year playoff run that the Red Wings had. But they were able to get that Stanley Cup championship in 1997. So a great look back on it would be check out one of our episodes here on the Captain Lou Sports Network, and of course 12 Ounce Sports, where you can see all of our episodes. I invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channels for both. You'll get all of our episodes, but take a look back or take a listen. It's available on Apple Podcast as well. A great conversation with Keith Gabe, who was the longtime reporter for the Detroit Free Press covering those Red Wings teams. He wrote a book on the Russian Five and helped produce that film on there. And he had some great insight on that team, some of the players before and after. It was a great interview. I invite you to check that out as well. So the 1997 Stanley Cup champions, they were the Detroit Red Wings. They went on to win again in 98 and then 2002 and, of course, 2008. Another player off of that 2002 team, by the way, Pavel Datsyuk, just got elected to the Pro Hockey Hall of Fame. So that makes 13 people, 10 players and 3 executives and coaches that have made the Hall of Fame off of that team. One of the best, if not the best teams ever assembled, that 2002 team. Getting back to 97, the Red Wings steamrolled through the playoffs, exacted revenge on the Colorado Avalanche after what happened in 96. And as we mentioned, they were able to steamroll Ron Hextall and the Philadelphia Flyers in 1997 to win that Stanley Cup. All right, taking a look at some of the other champions, let's go to the NBA champions of that year. It was interesting with the Chicago Bulls. They had their first run of 3 straight titles from 91 to 93. And of course, then we all know what happened. Michael Jordan took a couple of years off. Then they were able to come back and win in 96, 95, 96. Well, then came 96, 97. They were looking for a repeat. They were looking to try to get their 5th world championship. It was an interesting playoff run. Some new blood in the NBA in the playoffs. The Washington Bullets at the time, that was their name before they changed it to the Wizards. They got into the playoffs for the first time in like 8 years. The Los Angeles Clippers, I think that was the first time they were in the playoffs since 1983 or 90, something like that. It had been a long time back when they were the San Diego Clippers. Well, both those teams didn't last in the playoffs very long because the Chicago Bulls were the top seed. They beat the Washington Bullets 3-0, and the Clippers were ousted in 3 games. The opening round was the best 3 out of 5 back then, and they beat the Clippers 3-0. Other first-round opponents in that, or first-round matchups, the Atlanta Hawks beat the Detroit Pistons. That ended the Pistons' run of 5 straight trips to the, or I beg your pardon, that was the last time Detroit made the playoffs until 2002. They lost in 5 games, 3-2. Then it was New York over Charlotte 3-0. Miami edged Orlando in a great series, 3-2. Lakers beat Portland 3-1. And it was Houston over Minnesota 3-0. That was Minnesota's first trip, by the way, to the playoffs, and they got swept. And Seattle, which is now, of course, Oklahoma City, they beat Phoenix in 5 games, 3-2. Then Houston over Seattle in 7. That was a monster series. Utah over the Lakers in the semifinal, 4-1. Miami in 7 over New York. That ignited that rivalry. And then, of course, Chicago over Atlanta, 4-1. Chicago with no trouble over Miami, 4-1. Utah beat Houston 4-2. And that set up that first ever NBA Finals appearance for the Utah Jazz, and they were able to win that one. Or they were able, or actually, they went up against Chicago. Chicago won that one 4-2. And as we look at some of the other things that kind of happened in the NBA season, the Lakers signed Shaquille O'Neal, rather, and he became a fixture with the Los Angeles Lakers until 2004. A lot of crazy stuff going on in that season as well. You remember Dennis Rodman? He got 11-game suspension for kicking a reporter after a play underneath the basket. Just crazy stuff going on. And again, we talked about the Chicago Bulls getting back on top again. They won their world championship. They won 69 games that year. The year previously, they won 70, looking to go to be the first team to win back-to-back 70 wins, have 70-win seasons. Went all the way to the last game. They were 68-10 at one point. All they needed was to do is go 2-2 in their last 4 games. They went 1-3. Scottie Pippen missed a 3-pointer at the end of the game. So they finished 69-13, which was still tied for second best all time with the 1972 LA Lakers. And again, like I said, they went on to win the world championship. The other record that they tried to get was to tie the Boston Celtics for the best home record in a single season. Boston, of course, with one of the best teams of all time in 1985-86, went 40-1. The Bulls were sitting at 39-1. Lost that season finale and finished at 39-2. So the Chicago Bulls, again, won their second of 3 straight for a second time, their 5th championship in 7 years. They would go on again in 1998 to win a 3rd straight championship, the final world championship for the Bulls. Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Phil Jackson, Dennis Rodman, that whole triumphant. But it was a great run. And it was it's funny as you think that a lot of the people thought that might have been a failure not getting that 70th win 2 years in a row, but they were able to easily win, and they got into the NBA Finals again and won their 5th world title. So there you go. All right, so again, that was the 1997 NBA World Champions. As we'll take a look. Let's before we go to break, we'll take a break here in a moment, but we're going to go. Let's take a look at the NFL season in 1997, shall we? The Green Bay Packers were coming off of a Super Bowl championship year, their first Super Bowl since the 60s. Brett Favre, of course, was the quarterback. They were looking for a repeat. Their opponent that year, of course, was the Denver Broncos. Denver, they were, I don't know how many times they've been to the Super Bowl. I want to believe this is their 5th trip to the Super Bowl. Of course, they had a couple in the 70s where they got beat. In the 80s, they were beaten by the San Francisco 49ers and the Washington Redskins. And then, of course, this is their opportunity. John Elway was beaten a couple of times, in the Super Bowl. Of course, we all know those back-to-back years they won in the championship game in the 80s against the Cleveland Browns in the AFC championship game, only to get beaten in the Super Bowl. But now this is their opportunity in the 90s. The big storyline that year was with John Elway finally get over the hump, finally get that Super Bowl that had been evading him or eluding him all those years. Well, it started out in the 1997 season. Really, they ended up with a record that year. They ended up not winning their division. Kansas City, led by a quarterback, I think you might recognize him, Joe Montana, who went 13-3. The Denver Broncos were 12-4 that year, a wild card team. So they had to go through the extra round in playoffs, and they were able to do that. They took on Jacksonville in the opening round of the playoffs, a team that beat them the year before. Denver won that one easily at Mile High Stadium, 42-17. So they took on next the Kansas City Chiefs. You expected a high-scoring game in that one. I remember watching that game back in 1997. They took on Kansas City, and they beat the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead 14-10. Marcus Allen was on that team as well, I believe, for Kansas City. They were a good team. In the other bracket, New England, of course, beat Miami in the opening round of the playoffs 17-3. So they got Pittsburgh in the second round of the playoffs. Pittsburgh, of course, trying to get back on top for another Super Bowl. Pittsburgh beat New England 7-6. So that set up the AFC Championship game at Three Rivers Stadium, and Denver wins 24-21. So they go to the Super Bowl. Who would they take on? Well, we'll find out here. As in the playoffs in 1996 or 97, rather, Tampa Bay took on the Detroit Lions. This was the first year under the Bobby Ross regime for the Detroit Lions, replacing Wayne Fontes. Tampa Bay won that one 20-10. Minnesota took on the Giants and beat the Giants 23-22. And then those two teams got to the second round. Green Bay took on Tampa, won that one at Lambeau 21-7. San Francisco, the number one seed in the NFC, took on Minnesota and won that one 38-22. That set up the NFC Championship game at Candlestick Park or 3Com Park, whatever you wanted to call it back then. And the Green Bay Packers won that one 23-10. So it was going to be Green Bay and Denver in the Super Bowl. And Denver would end up winning that one 31-24. They would get their first Super Bowl championship, first of two for John Elway. John Elway, of course, would retire after the 98 season with that Super Bowl win over the Dirty Birds, the Atlanta Falcons. So again, Denver, they became just the second wild card team to win the Super Bowl, get through the Super Bowl gauntlet, or the playoffs rather, and get that Super Bowl victory, as they would finish 12-4 that year. So Denver in 1997, in that season, would culminate that with a Super Bowl victory, their first. And again, like I said, they would go on to win two straight, and they would end up getting John Elway those two Super Bowl rings that eluded him all those years. All right, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to take a look at more of the champions from 1997 right here on a championship year in sports history, 1997, on 12 Ounce Sports and the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube.
Hi, everybody. Captain Lou here from 12 Ounce Sports and, of course, the Captain Lou Extravaganza and Captain Lou's championship years in sports history. Hey, if you're like me, you love to go to ball games. Baseball, football, basketball, whatever. Minor league baseball, especially this summer, there's nothing better than a Saturday night game, Major League or minor league baseball, Sunday afternoon. I've got the place for you to go to get those tickets for those games. Tickets.12ouncesports.com. We are a ticket broker, which means we don't charge you the exorbitant fees that you might see on some of those other secondary markets. Hey, if there's a concert you want to go to this summer, tickets.12ouncesports.com. Use the promo code 12ounce as well, and you'll get a better discount. Tickets.12ouncesports.com. It's that simple. Can't say it enough. For the best prices on tickets this summer, make sure you go to tickets.12ouncesports.com.
Like I said, if there is a game, I can't say it enough, if there's a game you want to go to, a concert, whatever, this summer, minor league baseball, we've got tickets for that. And again, we are a ticket broker, so you're not going to get those fees that you see on some of those other secondary sites. That's tickets.12ouncesports.com. Check us out. And again, use the promo code 12ounce and you'll get an even better discount. Speaking of discounts, and if you like coffee, if you're a coffee drinker like I am, I highly recommend you check out jobbycoffee.com. Jobby Coffee's got great instant coffee, abundance of flavors, just a few of them, regular or decaf, the normal ones, but you've got salted caramel, French vanilla, my favorite, Irish cream, chocolate flavor, you name it. Check out jobbycoffee.com. For instant coffee, it's so easy to use. You don't have the messy coffee grounds or anything like that. You take 2 teaspoons or a tablespoon, however strong you want it, iced or hot. It is so good. Just again, I invite you to check out jobbycoffee.com. Use the promo code Captain Lou while you're there, and you'll get 15% off of your purchase. That is jobbycoffee.com. And again, it's a great way to go for coffee for you coffee drinkers like me. All right, let's continue here. 1997 is our focus here on the Captain Lou's championship years in sports history. Glad you're with us here tonight. Kind of a potpourri as we take a last look at 1997. By the way, after the 4th of July week, when we get back here live, it'll be 2004 will be our focus year. We'll go through all the champions. We'll get some more special guests. We've got some great guests lined up, by the way, coming up in July. So I invite you to stay tuned to that and keep track on my follow me on Twitter at The Real Captain Lou, where you get all of our lists of all of our guests on our shows. Well, let's take a look at the March Madness of 1997. That was a fun year. Arizona, of course, won that national championship over Kentucky in overtime. It was their first national championship that year, 1997. And if I'm not mistaken, and I know I'm not, that was the last year that Michigan State has not made the NCAA tournament. Tom Izzo's got a run, I believe, of 28 years or 27 years now, straight appearances in the NCAA tournament. 1997 was the last year that Michigan State did not make it. And they've had one incredible run. But in 1997, it was interesting. Arizona, as I mentioned, they became the only school since the introduction of the 60-14 bracket back in 1985. They were the only school to beat 3 number 1 seeds in the tournament, beating Kansas, who was the overall number 1 seed in that tournament. So it absolutely incredible run by Arizona. To say a team deserved to be in it, they deserve to be in it. That's for sure. Because Arizona was a number 4 seed, so they beat Kansas, like I said, to get to the Final Four, 85-82, and then in the championship game, they beat Kentucky, like I said. In the semifinals, they beat North Carolina by the score of 66-58. Minnesota was in the other Final Four against Kentucky. They lost 78-69, and then later Minnesota had to forfeit all their wins because of probation, the academic fraud scandal back in the mid to late 90s. So all their records in that tournament. But the top 4 seeds that year were North Carolina, Minnesota, Kentucky, and Kansas. And Arizona beat 3 of them. It was one heck of a run for Arizona to get to that national championship. They had their run. Let's see, who did they beat in the tournament? Arizona, as I mentioned, was a 4 seed. See if I can pull that up real quick here. I had it right in front of me, of course. Now I can't find it. Here we go. Arizona beat South Alabama. Then they beat College of Charleston. Then, of course, they beat Kansas, as I mentioned. Then they beat a Providence team that made it. They had to go to overtime to win that one, 96-92. But then the Wildcats, again in the Final Four, beat North Carolina and then beat Kentucky, Rick Pitino's Kentucky team. And they went on to win their first national championship. So, again, it's hard to believe. We talk about these years. 27 years already. 27 years ago, Arizona won their first national championship. And a school of that kind of pedigree, it's amazing they hadn't won one before that. But they have since been to the top of the mountain and won other national championships. But hard to believe that 1997, all those years, that was their first taste of the trophy as the national champion. So kind of crazy if you think about it. So moving on to 1997, Major League Baseball that year. That was another interesting year. Let's take a quick look at the MLB season as, again, the Florida Marlins, at least that's what they called themselves back then. They were an expansion team. I believe they came in 1993, if I'm not mistaken. And some interesting tidbits from the 1997 season. That was the last year that the Milwaukee Brewers played in the American League. Those of you that know baseball history know that they played in the American League. They're in the American League East for years and years and years when it was a 2-division league back then. They were in with Detroit, New York, and Boston and all of them. Then, of course, they made it to the World Series in 1982, losing to the St. Louis Cardinals. That strike split year of 1982, I believe it was, or I beg your pardon, 1982. And so, but they ended up going to the National League. And another crazy tidbit about that was in 1997, the National League wanted Kansas City to go, and they turned it down. Milwaukee was the second choice to go to the National League. So it would have been interesting to see the Kansas City Royals in the National League. But I digress. As the Florida Marlins, in their 5th year, as I mentioned, 1993 was their first year in organized baseball. They went all the way to win their first Major League World Series championship in a 7-game thriller over the Cleveland Indians. Now, if we look back at the playoffs from that year, let's see if I can bring those up. Probably can't. Let me see real quick. I know kind of on the whim here. All right, here we go. In the playoffs that year, there was that was the year there was 4 teams. And that was they only had one wild card team back then. They had the 3 divisions and one wild card team. So in the American League, it was the Cleveland Indians, or the Guardians now, champions of the American League Central. The Yankees were the wild card team because Baltimore won the American League East just like last year. And Seattle was the winner out west. And then the National League, it was the Eastern Division winning Atlanta Braves. They're in the midst of that long run of division championships. They took on Houston, who was the champions of the Central. And then the wild card team was Florida, and the winners out west was San Francisco. So we had the 14 brackets in each division, or in each league. And in the wild card round, or the divisional series, if you will, it was the New York Yankees against the Cleveland Indians, or Cleveland Indians back then, now the Cleveland Guardians. The Guardians won that one 3-2 in a thrilling series. Baltimore beat Seattle 3-1. So it was Cleveland and Baltimore in the American League Championship Series. And then in the National League, it was Atlanta over Houston 3-0. And it was Florida shocking San Francisco, the wild card team, 3-0 in that one. So then it was Cleveland and Baltimore, Florida and Atlanta in the ALCS and the NLCS. Both series went 6 games. And of course, it was the wild card Florida Marlins with a 4-2 win over the Atlanta Braves. Again, Atlanta not getting back to the World Series with that long run of divisional titles and only one World Championship. In the other end, it was Cleveland, 4-2 over Baltimore to get to the World Series. Not a whole lot of people gave the Florida Marlins much of a chance to win that series, but the Marlins did win in 7 games over Cleveland, 4-3, a very, very thrilling World Series championship. And this would be the last time Cleveland made it to the World Series until 2016. Of course, we all know what happened there. They had a lead and blew that lead against the Chicago Cubs. And in the National League Championship Series, as I mentioned, Florida stole Game 1 on the road, and that's all it took. They were able to keep their momentum. Again, stymieing the Braves. The Braves would go to the National League Championship Series again in 1998. They would lose to the Padres in 6 games. So the Braves just one World Series appearance, or one World Series championship. That's all they could muster. But in 1997, it was all Cleveland. Both teams split the first 2 games of that World Series. And then the Marlins won Game 3 in Cleveland. I don't know if you remember that one. 14-11. What a monster game. Then it was snowy in Game 4 in Cleveland. The Marlins won that one to even that one up, set 2 games apiece. And in Game 7, the Indians were ahead 2-1 in the bottom of the 9th. 1 out. But Jose Mesa could not hold on for that World Series win. The Marlins tied it. The game went scoreless through the 10th. In the 11th inning, Edgar Renteria hit a hard line drive that hit off of Charles Nagy's glove, rolled into center field. Craig Counsell scored the winning run. And that gave the Miami Marlins, or the Florida Marlins, Miami, whatever you want to call them, their first World Series championship. And then, of course, right after that, they had a fire sale in 98. Went pretty much down to the bottom of the barrel, came back in 2003 to win another World Series championship under Jim Leyland and a youngster by the name of Miguel Cabrera. But the Marlins that year were World Series champions of 1997. All right, we thought we would end the show here looking back at 1997 with an individual championship, kind of one that was very important in sports history. And that, of course, being the what am I drawing a blank for? The Masters. I'm just drawing an absolute blank here. The Masters Championship. And a young man by the name of Tiger Woods, I think you may have heard of him, burst onto the scene. I'll never forget watching that tournament. I was working at a car dealership back then. Remember, we had it on the TV. And he started out, we all knew he was a young phenom, 20 years old at the time. Didn't know a whole lot about him. but knew that he was an up-and-comer. Well, he started out a little rough on that. If you remember that first day, he carted a 40 on the front 9, but then he blistered the back 9 with a 30, and he was within striking distance. John Houston was leading that opening round of the Masters at 4 under, but then Tiger got a 66 and shot a 65 or 65, 66 the next 2 rounds, opened up a 9-stroke lead after the 3rd round. He was Constantino Rocca was at -6. Paul Stankowski was at -5. Not exactly household names right now. Tom Kite was at -4 with Tom Watson. Colin Montgomery, I think, was at -3. And Fred Couples was at -2. Tiger Woods had a 9-shot lead. Ended up shooting a 69 in the final round. Won that one by 12 strokes. He ended up shooting 18 under par, which was the record. He broke the record set by Jack Nicklaus, won by 12 strokes over Tom Kite. Tommy Tolles was at -5. It was an amazing, amazing tournament run that weekend. And we all know who Tiger Woods was after that. And of course, we all know the story. He's got 5 green jackets, 15 majors. I don't know if he's got another one left in him, but he ended up winning that one 18 under par. Again, we talked about a little bit earlier. Hard to believe, 27 years ago, that that Tiger Woods won his first major at the Masters. And what a dominant, dominant Masters run that was. Of course, he went on to have some dominant years on the PGA Tour with his 15 majors. So, but pretty cool. That's his first Masters, 1997. 18 under par, shattering that record by Jack Nicklaus. And it's funny, his purse for that weekend, $486,000. I don't even know if that's top 20 anymore in these 4 majors, but it's crazy. All right. We said we were going to end it with the Masters, but we do want to take a look at one more championship, obviously one that's near and dear to our heart. 1997 was college football. There was a split national championship that year, the last year before they went to the BCS, I believe. And it came down to the voting. The Michigan Wolverines and the Nebraska Cornhuskers both finished undefeated that year in 1997. Nebraska at one time was number 1, and Florida at one time was number 1. Penn State was number 1, and then Michigan took on Penn State. Penn State lost the game to Nebraska, I believe. Anyways, Michigan took on Penn State when they were number 4, I believe, or number 3. Beat Penn State in the regular season. I remember that game, 34-8, and that brought Michigan up to number 1. They took on the number 4 team in the land that year in Ohio State. Won that one. Ohio State was, remember in 97, was looking to do what Michigan did to them. Ohio State came into a couple of games in 94, 95, I believe it was, undefeated. Michigan knocked them off. That was back when Michigan had Ohio State's number, back before Ohio State turned the tables and had that long run of dominance against Michigan. But that 1997 Lloyd Carr team went to the Rose Bowl to take on Washington State and Ryan Leaf. And Brian Griese was the quarterback for Michigan, and what a great run it was for the Wolverines. They ended up beating Washington State in the Rose Bowl, and of course Nebraska won they won their bowl game. Oh gosh, I had it right here, right on the tip of my tongue here. They won their bowl game, and of course I thought I had it here, but apparently not. They ended up winning their bowl game, and it came down to the last vote, and it came down to one voter, and that, of course, was Phil Fulmer from Tennessee, who lost to Nebraska in that bowl game. He picked Michigan 4th, and that cost Michigan an outright national championship. The Associated Press had Michigan number 1. The coaches poll had Nebraska number 1. So both teams, it was a co-national championship, I guess, technically. So both teams got that national championship in 1997. And that would be Michigan's last national championship until this past season. So it was a fun year that year. It was a good run, some great college football that year. A lot of, teams jockeying back and forth, some great games. Florida was right up there, Florida State, Alabama, of course, and Michigan and Ohio State. and Penn State was right up at the top of their game as well. So, all right, that's a look, kind of a potpourri look at a championship year in sports history of 1997. We're going to take a break next week. We're going to be off for the 4th of July holiday week, but we'll be back on July 9th for another edition of Captain Lou's Championship Years in Sports History. We're going to take a look in July at the year 2004. So we invite you to check us out for that as well. And we'll have some great guests lined up as we get this podcast going. It's a new concept. We started in May, where what we do is we take a calendar year each month and try to take a look at that and all the champions of that year. We get some guests. Unfortunately, couldn't get one for tonight, but we thought we would take a look at all the champions here to wrap up this month and to spotlight 1997. So we hope you enjoyed it. We hope you enjoyed the podcast. It will be available on Apple Podcast form probably on Thursday. So keep an eye out for that. But you can watch a replay of this and all of our shows on our YouTube channels. We invite you to subscribe to the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube and, of course, 12 Ounce Sports on YouTube as well. Hey, again, don't forget to join us tomorrow night for another edition of the Captain Lou Extravaganza, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, as we'll take a look at the goings-on in the world of sports, a new Stanley Cup champion, and we'll kind of preview the NBA draft and take a look at what else is going on in the world of sports. We invite you to check us out there. All right, everybody. Again, we want to thank the folks at tickets.12ouncesports.com and Javi Coffee for helping make this possible. If there's a sporting event you want to go to, make sure you check out tickets.12ouncesports.com. And if you're a coffee drinker like I am, make sure you check out javicoffee.com, the best around in instant coffee. Make sure you use the promo code Captain Lou for 15% off of your purchase. All right, that's going to do it for 12 Ounce Sports and the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube. Yours truly, Captain Lou, saying keep your heads up, keep your sticks down, keep your feet moving. But more importantly, keep your minds open. Good night, everybody. We'll see you soon.